Welcome to the channel. Today we will discuss Brazil's economy in 2025. Brazil, Latin America's largest economy and the world's ninth largest by nominal GDP, finds itself at a critical juncture in 2025. After 3 consecutive years of robust growth averaging around 3%, the country faces a more complex economic landscape characterized by moderating growth, persistent fiscal challenges, and evolving monetary policy dynamics. Under President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva's third term, Brazil is working to balance economic growth with fiscal sustainability while positioning itself as a major player in global affairs. The Brazilian economy in 2025 presents a study in contrasts. Strong fundamentals in certain sectors alongside significant structural challenges that require careful navigation. From a resilient labor market and growing tourism sector to mounting fiscal pressures and currency volatility, Brazil's economic story this year reflects both the opportunities and obstacles facing emerging economies in an increasingly complex global environment. Brazil's economic growth in 2025 tells a story of gradual deceleration from the robust expansion seen in recent years. Real GDP grew by 3.4% in 2024, driven by solid consumption, supported by a heated labor market and fiscal transfers, and the recovery of investments. However, the momentum is shifting as the year progresses. Current projections for 2025 GDP growth vary among institutions, but converge around a more modest expansion. Gross domestic product is now seen expanding 2.4% in 2025, up from the 2.3% seen in March, according to the latest government forecasts. This represents a significant slowdown from the previous year's performance, reflecting the impact of tighter monetary conditions and external headwinds. The International Monetary Fund and other international organizations project similar trends, with the IMF projecting 2.2% growth this year, following growth rates of about 3% from 2022 to 24. More conservative estimates from BBVA research suggest even slower growth, with GDP growth is expected to slow to 1.6% in 2025 and 1.8% in 2026, following 3 years of around 3% growth. The growth deceleration stems from multiple factors. The slowdown will be driven by tighter monetary conditions, a weaker fiscal impulse, and a less favorable global context, though certain sectors continue to show resilience. The primary sector, including agriculture and mining, along with Brazil's robust labor market, are expected to provide some stability during this transition period. Inflation remains a central concern for Brazilian policymakers in 2025, with price pressures exceeding the central bank's targets and influencing monetary policy decisions. The Banco Central do Brasil has maintained a vigilant stance, with interest rates playing a crucial role in economic dynamics. Current inflation projections for 2025 show persistent pressure on prices. Consumer prices are expected to rise 5.0% this year and 3.6% next year, compared with previous estimates of 4.9% and 3.5% respectively. This inflation rate significantly exceeds the central bank's 3% target rate, necessitating continued monetary tightening measures. The monetary policy response has been decisive, with higher interest rates serving as the primary tool to combat inflationary pressures. However, this approach creates a delicate balancing act, as elevated rates, while helping to control inflation, also serve to moderate economic growth and investment activity. Real GDP growth is expected to moderate to 2.2% in 2025 as higher interest rates and an adverse external environment weigh on investment, illustrating the trade-offs inherent in monetary policy decisions. The central bank's credibility remains intact, having successfully brought inflation down from much higher levels in previous years. Brazil's economy has been remarkably resilient as inflation has come down over the past 2 years, though the current environment presents renewed challenges that require sustained policy attention. Perhaps the most significant economic challenge facing Brazil in 2025 is the state of government finances, which has become a source of market concern and policy focus. The fiscal situation represents a complex web of structural issues, debt dynamics, and political constraints that influence broader economic performance. The fiscal framework established by the current administration has shown mixed results. Government finances will likely remain a key challenge for the foreseeable future. Despite efforts to maintain fiscal discipline within existing parameters, The challenge is compounded by the interaction between fiscal policy and monetary conditions, creating feedback loops that can amplify economic pressures. Debt servicing costs have become a significant burden on the federal budget. An increase in interest rates causes the cost of servicing the debt, now at more than 7% of GDP, to rise, which makes fiscal policy even more unsustainable. This creates a vicious cycle where monetary tightening to combat inflation increases fiscal pressures, which in turn can fuel further inflationary expectations. The government has indicated intentions to implement additional fiscal measures, though market skepticism remains. Although the Brazilian government will likely announce more spending cuts, they are unlikely to eliminate investor skepticism, portending further macroeconomic instability. This dynamic highlights the importance of credible fiscal reform that addresses both short-term pressures and long-term sustainability. Structural reforms remain essential for fiscal health. Challenges related to aging, particularly in health and pensions, are projected to pressure public finances, indicating that demographic trends will continue to strain government budgets without comprehensive reform initiatives. The Brazilian real has experienced significant volatility in 2025, reflecting both domestic fiscal concerns and broader global economic dynamics. Currency movements have important implications for inflation, trade competitiveness, and investor confidence. Exchange rate pressures have been notable, with the currency deteriorating from 5.24 per dollar on December 31, 2024 to 5.78 per dollar on February 13, 2025. While the central bank has taken measures to stabilize the currency, underlying fiscal concerns continue to influence market sentiment and exchange rate dynamics. The relationship between fiscal policy and currency stability has become increasingly evident. Market participants closely monitor government fiscal announcements and policy decisions, with currency movements often reflecting confidence in the government's ability to maintain fiscal discipline. This creates an additional channel through which fiscal policy affects broader economic conditions, as currency depreciation can contribute to inflationary pressures through imported goods prices. Brazil's external position remains generally stable, supported by strong commodity exports and a diversified economic base. However, global economic conditions and trade dynamics continue to influence the country's external accounts, with implications for growth and policy flexibility. Brazil's labor market represents one of the bright spots in the 2025 economic landscape, demonstrating remarkable resilience despite broader economic headwinds. Employment conditions have remained robust, providing important support for household consumption and overall economic stability. Unemployment hit a 10-year low in mid-2024, reflecting the strength of job creation and labor market recovery. This achievement represents a significant policy success, particularly given the challenging global environment and domestic economic pressures. The labor market strength has provided crucial support for household consumption, which remains a key driver of economic activity. The heated labor market conditions have important implications for both economic growth and inflation dynamics. Strong employment supports consumer spending power, though it can also contribute to wage price pressures that influence inflation expectations. Policymakers must balance the benefits of full employment with the need to maintain price stability. Labor market resilience is expected to continue providing some stability to the economy throughout 2025. The primary sector and labor market resilience will provide important support during the period of moderating growth, helping to cushion the impact of tighter monetary conditions and external headwinds. Different sectors of the Brazilian economy are experiencing varied performance in 2025, with some areas showing particular strength, while others face headwinds from policy tightening and global conditions. The tourism sector emerges as a standout performer, with exceptional growth prospects for 2025. Brazil's travel and tourism sector is poised for remarkable growth in 2025, expected to contribute nearly 8% of the country's GDP, representing a significant economic opportunity. This growth is driven by multiple factors, including rising international and domestic visitor spending, job creation within the sector, and strategic investments in infrastructure and promotion. The primary sector, encompassing agriculture, mining, and related activities, continues to demonstrate resilience and competitiveness. Brazil's natural resource endowments and agricultural productivity provide important sources of export revenue and economic stability. These sectors benefit from global demand for commodities and Brazil's competitive advantages in production and logistics. Manufacturing and industrial sectors face more challenging conditions due to higher interest rates and tighter credit conditions. Investment activity has moderated as businesses adjust to the higher cost of capital and uncertain economic outlook. However, recent tax reforms are expected to provide some support by improving productivity and reducing compliance costs. The services sector, which represents the largest portion of the Brazilian economy, reflects the broader economic trends with moderate growth supported by continued employment strength, but constrained by tighter monetary conditions and reduced fiscal stimulus. Brazil's long-term economic prospects depend significantly on the implementation of structural reforms that address productivity, competitiveness, and institutional efficiency. The reform agenda encompasses multiple areas critical for sustainable growth. Tax reform represents a major structural initiative with important economic implications. The recent indirect tax reform is expected to improve productivity, reduce compliance costs, simplify the tax system, and remove numerous economic distortions. This reform addresses long-standing issues in Brazil's complex tax system and should support business efficiency and competitiveness over time. Productivity enhancement remains a critical challenge for the Brazilian economy. Brazil's most significant economic challenge ahead is its productivity lag compared to the most dynamic economies on the planet. Addressing this challenge requires improvements across multiple dimensions, including education, innovation, infrastructure, and business environment reforms. The World Bank identifies several key areas for structural improvement. To sustain growth amid demographic changes, more structural reforms are needed to increase productivity, especially outside the agricultural sector, improve the business environment, promote innovation and trade openness, strengthen educational outcomes, increase savings and infrastructure investments, and enhance resilience to climate change. Demographic challenges add urgency to the reform agenda. An aging population will place increasing demands on health and pension systems while potentially reducing the labor force growth rate. These trends require proactive policy responses to maintain fiscal sustainability and economic dynamism. Brazil's economic performance in 2025 occurs within a complex global environment that influences trade, investment, and policy dynamics. Under President Lula's leadership, Lula has sought to reassert Brazil's role as a major player in international affairs with implications for economic policy and external relations. Global economic conditions present both opportunities and challenges for Brazil. Commodity demand from major trading partners influences export performance and foreign exchange earnings. At the same time, global financial conditions and investor sentiment affect capital flows and currency stability. The country's approach to international economic integration balances openness with strategic autonomy. Brazil continues to pursue trade relationships and investment opportunities while maintaining policy independence on key domestic economic decisions. Climate change considerations are increasingly influencing economic policy and international relations. Brazil's role in global climate initiatives, particularly regarding Amazon preservation and sustainable development, affects both domestic policy choices and international economic partnerships. The economic policy environment in 2025 requires careful calibration across multiple objectives, maintaining price stability, supporting growth, ensuring fiscal sustainability, and addressing structural challenges. The interconnected nature of these goals creates both opportunities and constraints for policymakers. Monetary policy is likely to remain restrictive in the near term as the central bank works to bring inflation back to target levels. The challenge lies in maintaining credibility while avoiding excessive economic contraction. Communication and forward guidance will be crucial for managing market expectations and minimizing uncertainty. Fiscal policy faces the most significant challenges, requiring both short-term stabilization measures and long-term structural reforms. Credible fiscal consolidation plans could help reduce market pressures and create space for more supportive policies over time. However, the political economy of fiscal reform remains complex, requiring careful navigation of competing interests and priorities. Structural reforms offer the potential for significant long-term benefits, but require sustained political commitment and implementation capacity. The tax reform process provides a positive example of successful structural change, suggesting that ambitious reform programs remain feasible with appropriate political support. Brazil's economy in 2025 presents a complex picture of resilience amid challenges with strong fundamentals in key areas offset by significant fiscal and monetary policy constraints. The country's economic performance reflects broader themes in emerging market economics: the importance of maintaining macroeconomic stability while pursuing structural reforms and sustainable growth. The moderation in growth from the robust pace of recent years was expected and largely reflects the normalization of monetary policy and external conditions. However, the persistence of fiscal challenges and their interaction with monetary policy creates ongoing uncertainty that markets and policymakers must navigate carefully. Success in addressing current challenges will depend on the government's ability to implement credible fiscal reforms while maintaining the institutional strength that has served Brazil well in previous periods of economic difficulty. The country's diversified economy, strong institutions, and experienced policymakers provide important foundations for managing current pressures and positioning for future growth. The tourism sector's exceptional performance and the resilience of the labor market demonstrate that opportunities for growth exist even in challenging environments. Combined with ongoing structural reforms and Brazil's natural resource advantages, these positive factors suggest that the current period of adjustment, while difficult, can lead to a more sustainable and balanced economic foundation. Looking ahead, Brazil's economic trajectory will depend critically on policy choices made in 2025 and their credibility with markets and citizens. The combination of fiscal discipline, structural reform, and appropriate monetary policy can help the country navigate current challenges while building the foundation for stronger and more sustainable growth in the years ahead. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.